Hi, this is Samia with your dose of Henna Fix, and today I'm going to talk about how to store your henna properly. Storing the henna paste properly can make a huge difference in helping you to get a better stain or helping you to get a not so good stain. So let's begin by talking about the henna powder. The henna powder is a very essential part of the henna making process, and you do want to store it properly. The best way to store it, in my opinion, is in the freezer. And the reason why I said the freezer is because, well, a lot of things last a lot longer in the freezer. The freezer tends to keep things fresh, and henna is from a plant in a powder form, so you do want to keep it as fresh as possible. However, most importantly, we have a really hot climate where I live, as I probably mentioned a bajillion times before. It can get over 100 degrees outside, so if I am inside and our AC is not working, which has happened, I mean, you're talking major disaster here, because the henna needs to stay in a cool and dry place. So I like to put it in the freezer for optimal results, and in that way the henna powder is going to last you for a very long time. If you are storing a used packet of the henna powder in the freezer, you just want to seal it properly. So make sure that you let all the air out and you really close it properly so the cold moisture cannot get into the henna powder. So what happens if the henna powder is not stored properly? Well, it's not going to stain well. You are effectively killing off its ability to stain well. So you want to keep it stored properly. And the old henna, I say, looks more like a shadow of itself. It looks faded and looks like it has lost a bit of color. So it does help to figure out the henna powder you're using to see what the color originally is, which you can compare it should you choose to store it anywhere outside of the freezer. Now, if you're going to be trying out different powders and you don't remember which powder is which, what I would do is take a picture and print it out and put it on top before you store it, so you know exactly what it is going to look like. The second essential thing that we need to know is the essential oils. Essential oils are a good part of your henna making process, and you do want to store them properly so that they can be kept fresh for as long as possible. If they're old, they're going to impact the quality of your henna paste. So as with the henna powder, you want to store them in a cool and dry place. Not in the fridge, and definitely not in the freezer. So store them in a cool and dry place, not where you generally store stuff. Now, I want to say that because our guest room is kind of like a storage room. I do have a little bit of things happening in there. So what that storage room tends to do is it tends to be closed, and that means that the temperature there is really cold throughout the day. Well, really cold compared to the rest of the house anyway. So I don't like to store it there. In fact, I like to put it in that cabinet behind me, open it, and I put them in there, and that way they are in the same place as I am, and I know if it's hot and I know if it is cold. The only time it has gotten worrisome for me was, like I mentioned before, when the AC was not working for a good week and a half or 2 weeks. I don't remember now. It was terrible. But that was the only time where I was concerned, and so I had to play around with that a little bit. However, you want to store them in a cool and dry place. I do want to mention that each essential oil has its own property and own things. I am not an expert in that, and so I recommend that you contact the supplier where you're getting it from, or go back to the store or whatever you are, email the company or things like that, and they will let you know what is the recommended method to store them and for how long they can be stored that way in order to remain fresh. One thing to note though is that essential oils should always be in a glass bottle. Normally they come in amber bottles. Now, if you are getting them for some reason in a plastic bottle, then you need to change the store or change your supplier, because this is not the way essential oils should be stored, because they do tend to leach off chemicals. So you want to make sure that the essential oils you're using are being stored in an amber bottle. This is especially important if you're going to be making your own blend. I like to have a number of essential oils that I use in my oil blend, which I use to make henna paste. So if that is the case, remember, store it in the amber bottle. Either buy them separately or you can reuse one of the empty bottles that you have. But yeah, store them in the amber bottles in a cool, dry place. So now that we've talked about what makes the henna cones and how to store them, let's go towards the henna cones themselves, which are the magic behind everything. So if you're going to be doing a beautiful design and the henna cone was not stored properly, that is going to result in a bad stain, and that is always sad. So you want to store them properly. I like to say that there are two different forms of storage. There is a short-term storage and there is a long-term storage. The short-term storage is in the fridge and the long-term storage is in the freezer. So let's say that I'm expecting a client in about 2 hours that I need to prepare for. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to the henna which I made and let dye release, and I coned it and I put it in the freezer. I'm going to go back to the henna cone which I have frozen. I will take it out, let it thaw out in about 5 minutes or so, and I'm just going to put it on a counter and let it chill there for a while. Like I said, 5 minutes should be enough. By the time that you can roll it around your finger and it's soft and squishy, that means that it is ready to go. So this is what I'm going to use on my client. That way the henna is really fresh, because I will not be able to make fresh henna every single day. That's not how it works. So I'm just gonna make it, keep it frozen, and take them out as I need to. So that way I call it a long-term storage, because you can access them in the long term. So if I'm going to be doing a henna party, or if I'm going to be doing a festival or big event or things like that, I'm going to be using the short-term storage. That means I'm going to make the henna paste, let it dye release, I'm going to cone it, and I'm going to transfer it to the fridge. The longer that it stays out at room temperature, the quicker the dye release is going to be. So you want to slow the process by putting it in the fridge. So when it is in the fridge, now it depends what is the purpose that I made it for. If I made it for a professional use, I'm not going to keep it in the fridge for longer than 2 days, because I feel that, you know, it's a little bit past its time. So I keep it in the fridge for 2 days, and if I have not used it before the 2 days are over, I just transfer them into the freezer and I can use it at that time. But if I'm going to be practicing with it, or if I just have cones sitting in the fridge that I forgot about, I can always practice it on myself or do it on my friends or things like that. So at that time, you can keep the henna in your fridge for some time, but of course not but it's not going to last as long as it does the ones in the freezer. The way to find out how the henna cone is old is actually by using it. You're going to see that the texture is a little bit difficult to work with. It might be a little difficult for it to come out of the cone. So you might have to cut the tip a little bit thicker, and you're going to notice eventually that the staining quality is just not that good. Even though I personally have used henna on myself for a week, it was sitting in the fridge, I believe it was for a week, it stained really nicely. But I still do think that it did not last as long as it would if it didn't stay for that long. Now I want to go a bit on a tangent here, because you might be wondering this question, that if the henna paste needs to be stored a certain way, well then what about the henna cones that I find sitting in the local market that is a few streets down? I can just go there and pick up a henna cone that's been sitting on the shelf. Now that is a very interesting question which I wish I could answer for you, because honestly it doesn't make sense. Henna is perishable, it goes bad after a while. It doesn't stain well, the texture changes, and eventually it's going to become almost impossible to work with. So how can it be that the henna cone was made fresh and then came from different continent into the United States or into wherever you are? It's coming from India, from Jordan, from any of those places. How is it possible that it's traveling all over, sitting in a plane and coming all across the ocean, and it still works properly and it still stains properly? Well, there's only one thing I can tell you about that, is that it has been adulterated. There is no way it is going to be fresh. There's absolutely no way, because you make the fresh henna, you play around with it, and you're going to be agreeing with me. It just cannot stay fresh without having chemicals involved. And this is what you're going to notice, that the texture of the pre-made cones generally is very different. It is runny, it clogs, but it stings amazingly. The reason why it is staining really good and the first 5 minutes you put it on is because they're adding a lot of chemicals and a lot of unwanted ingredients to increase the shelf life of the henna. Some of the times, if you were to go back to the original ingredients in the henna paste, you might notice that the henna itself is a really small quantity and it has been mixed with other things to make it work really well. Now, I know that in our lives we are surrounded with a lot of things which has been adulterated. Unfortunately, this is the reality, but I do want to say that whatever you put on your skin, it is seeping down into the bloodstream, and that is a very scientific fact. Our skin is an organ. Whatever is being putting on top, it is affecting our health in general. And if you are putting ingredients which are not only bad for you but are also illegal to use, I mean, there are some ingredients in there which just should not be used on the skin, and they just are because of the laws and how they're enforced is different in every country. And if you're putting it on your skin, you bet that it's going down into your bloodstream. So you want to be very, very careful of what you're putting on and how you're using it. Not only that, for the people who have gotten henna from, you know, pre-made cones or things like that, normally the one thing they tell me is that it didn't last that long. Generally it lasts for a few days because the chemical just works on your skin. It's a dark red or, you know, even black color, and then it goes away pretty fast. It's just not worth the hassle. It's not worth the money, and it definitely is not worth the impact it's going to have on your health. So go back to the natural henna, play with it, make it yourself, or you can, like I said in other videos before, you can source it from, you know, another artist, and you're going to see that the texture, the color, the feel, the entire experience is completely different. So going back to storing the henna paste, let's say that you are doing henna for a party or an event or a festival. What is the best way to store and use the henna there? That is a really, really good question. So you want to make sure the henna is at its optimal performance the entire time. Now, it is really important to know the temperature and the weather where you're going to be going to. If you're doing it outside, you gotta know the temperature. Like I mentioned a bajillion times in my videos, it becomes really hot outside, so I have to be really careful on how I am using and storing the henna paste. What I like to do is I have purchased an insulated lunch bag, and I put the henna cones, I make the henna paste, I cone it, and I put it in the fridge until it's ready to go, and I have it in the fridge in a Ziploc bag. I put it in there, and I put an ice freezing thingy in there. I have no idea, ice brick, freezing brick, I don't know what it's called, but it came with a lunch bag. You can pop it in the freezer, and essentially is like an ice brick that keeps the temperature in your lunchbox cold for a very long time. So this is how I like to do it for festivals which are, you know, a few days. But if I'm doing henna, let's say for a festival that is a week long, this is something that you're going to have to play around with. So you want to make the henna cones, and you want to maybe freeze some, put them in the fridge some, and if it's a week or so long, you're probably going to have to make henna throughout that week as it goes. One thing that does affect the henna paste is also fluctuating temperature. So let's say that it is really cold outside and your body temperature is warmer than the weather. So when you're holding the henna cone in your hand, it probably will become a little bit difficult to work with because it's like, wait, it was so cold, and now you're too hot, so it's gonna not like it too much. In that case, what I recommend is having 2 cones out so you can go back and forth between them. In the beginning, I did not know what was happening. I said it was a fresh henna cone and it just was clogging up on me. It wasn't working too well. Either the weather was too cold outside or the weather was too hot outside. So that really does make a difference. So in that case, if it is a very fluctuating circumstance, what you can do is have 2 cones out that are sitting outside. The rest of the cones are in your lunch bag, but the other 2 cones are sitting outside. And once one becomes a little bit finicky to work with because the temperature has changed, you can just switch it with the other cone and use it like that. I personally have not done henna for longer festivals. I become a little bit hesitant to do festivals that are lasting a week or so. I just want to stay away from them. I don't think it is my thing. But if it is your thing and you know how to store the henna cones, or you know what works for you, then please share it in the comments below, so anybody who's watching this video has that question can get some insight from somebody who knows what they're talking about. So this was a pretty informative video on how to store your henna powder, to store your essential oils, and to store your henna cones in your private sessions, as well as for your friends and for festivals and things like that. So I do hope that you find it helpful, and if you go through my channel and watch other videos, you're going to notice that I have a couple of videos talking about the henna cones and how to take care of it and things like that. So feel free to look around my channel. You're going to find things hopefully that you are looking for, and if there's something that's not there, I would love to hear your suggestions so I can talk about it. Leave them in the comment below, and of course don't forget to subscribe and like so we can see each other more and geek over henna, because why not? Henna is awesome. Let's talk about it more. I'm also available on Instagram and Facebook. I do hope that I will see you over there, and thank you very much for watching. Until next time, henna on.